If you tell me a few months ago when I was playing Season 2 that Diablo 4 is going to have a robust endgame system 2 seasons later, I would be in disbelief as if you're telling me that Starfield is a good game now. And if you tell me I will be having a great time grinding the endgame in Diablo 4, I might ask you for some of whatever that you are smoking. As much as I find it hard to believe, Diablo 4 actually has a functional endgame in Season 4, and that's what we are going to talk about in today's video. To understand why is it so hard to believe that Diablo 4 can have a good endgame system, we first have to draw a comparison with the state of the game in the previous seasons. We will start from Season 2 because the launch of the game and Season 1 were absolute disasters, so we are going to wipe it off the history by not talking about it. In Season 2, the game was basically in open beta. Yes, all the basic systems of the game are functional. There is a decent class system, rudimentary itemization, honestly pretty good campaign, and a simple gameplay loop in Hell Tides, a couple of endgame bosses, and nightmare dungeons. But there's not really any endgame content that will keep the players engaged for a long time after finishing the campaign. Sure, you can grind nightmare dungeons and endgame bosses, but once your character reaches a certain power level, those activities will start to feel very unrewarding and monotonous really quickly. Blizzard then released the Alibaba of Zir towards the end of the season, which is basically Nightmare Dungeon with enemy scaling crank up to 1000 and slaps a timer on it. But despite their desperate effort to create an endgame activity with minimal effort, the majority of the player base actually has something better to do with their time, contrary to what Blizzard believes. So it didn't really help with player retention. If this sounds bad, Season 3 was even worse. Season 3 was basically Blizzard slapping their player base in the face and saying, you will play whatever content we feel like releasing whenever we feel like releasing it. They released the Vault, which is Nightmare Dungeon again, but this time with traps, as the new gameplay loop mechanic. Besides having tons of loopholes and bugs on release, traps are just not something that the majority of the player base finds fun. While the Vault does drop a good amount of loot, instead of being rewarding, all it does is amplify the problem with the old itemization system. Because there were so many hyper-conditional affixes on the gears, sifting through a pile of loot was like trying to find gold in sand. But the real slap in the face is when Blizzard promised a leaderboard play mode during release, then proceeded to delay it 3 freaking times. But wait, there's more. After all the delays and waiting, what eventually got released was the same reused content as a Nightmare Dungeon with scores and completion times slapped on it. And yes, in typical Blizzard fashion, it also comes with bugs and exploits in what was supposed to be a competitive play mode. I think by now I have established that the endgame of Diablo 4 was so bad that it is outright disrespectful to its players. And the player base clearly does not like the attitude and the quality of the releases coming from Blizzard, and the player count of Season 3 clearly reflected that. The situation has never been so dire for Diablo 4. The player base has been disappointed for so many times, it became more and more clear that Season 4 will be the last chance for the game before it loses its relevancy forever. Fortunately, things start to change for the better around this time. There were some changes to the management of the company, where Bobby Kotick finally stepped down as the CEO for Activision, and Blizzard Entertainment has a new CEO, Johanna Faris, who replaces Mike Ibarra. I believe these changes allowed the teams of Diablo 4 to make the right decisions that make the game better, instead of chasing deadlines and monetization. The first evidence of that is that for the first time in the game's history, Blizzard announced that they will be delaying the release of the new season because they wanted to take the time to redesign the core itemization system and main gameplay loop activities such as the Helltide. Another bold decision that the team has made is to not develop any seasonal content for Season 4, so they can spend all their efforts in improving the fundamentals of the game. As if that's not enough, also for the first time ever, Blizzard actually created a public test server to allow players to help test the new patch and submit their feedback. And surprisingly, the team actually acknowledged many of the feedback and improved upon them prior to Season 4 release. This is truly a back against the wall, do or die situation, and Blizzard seems to be making all the right decisions, and it was looking really good as we move closer to the release date. Then, on May 14, the new season of Diablo 4 was finally released. I will spare you of my fanboying over how great the early game experience was. If for whatever reason you are interested in that, I will link my first impression video in the description. All I will say in this video is, the difference between Diablo 4 and the previous seasons is like comparing a microwave dinner to a Michelin star meal. But enough about the early game. We are supposed to talk about the big boy stuffs like the endgame in this video. The most important improvement that Blizzard has made with the endgame is that there are now meaningful goals for players to work towards. In their previous attempts, both the Abattoir of Zir and the Gauntlet do not give rewards that are proportionate to the effort that the player has to put in to conquer those content. In the new season, while working towards Nightmare Dungeon 100 already felt pretty good ever since they buffed the Glyph experience at the end of Season 2, it feels even better in Season 4 because of the massive player experience you can get from the events and the guaranteed 925 gear after Tier 41. As for the war bosses, there are now level 200 Uber variants of them and a brand new boss that is Andariel. This makes grinding for those Uber uniques less of a chore, but more of an aspirational goal to work towards to eventually be able to farm the Uber variants. Boss materials also now drop from all content in the game, so there will be no more falling asleep on your keyboard farming Hell Tides for those materials anymore. Speaking of Uber uniques, defeating Uber Lilith for the first time now rewards a Resplendent Spark, and once you have 4 of them, you can exchange them for any Uber unique of your choosing. So, this makes Uber Lilith another meaningful and rewarding endgame goal for the players. Last but definitely not the least, the newly introduced endgame dungeon, the Pit, serves as the ultimate challenge for players that have the time and desire to absolutely min-max their build, wherein the highest levels of the pits are supposedly only doable by the best builds in the game. And at the same time, the higher level pits also rewards more masterworking materials, which is crucial to improve character power. So, to summarize, there are now 4 endgame goals that are rewarding in their own way that the players can choose to work towards, namely Nightmare Dungeon 100, Uber endgame bosses, Uber Lilith, and Pit level 200. Not too shabby to keep the players occupied for one season. With the endgame goals out of the way, let's talk about the journey to get there. Because if the gameplay loop is not fun, we would rather be studying or working than to play Diablo 4 unless there is something wrong with your brain. First, let's talk about gear acquisition. For non-unique gear, since all in-game content now drops 925 gear, acquiring a set of decent gear with the right affixes is actually not that hard. And if you really want to farm for it, the Hell Tide is a fun way to rack up a ton of gears to maximize the chance of getting what you're looking for. Else, gambling using oboes is also a viable way to target a specific slot that you are missing. And as a last resort, since gold actually has value now, a lot of people are actually selling good gears on the trade market. So, if you really cannot find a specific gear with the affixes that you need, farming for gold and then buying the gear from other people is also a viable option now. But of course, we can't be only having the good things, or else life would be too easy. With the tempering system, there is a very good chance for your perfect gear to turn into imperfect ones, and there is no way to fix it after all tempering attempts has been exhausted. So, you have to either live with wearing the imperfect gear, or hope for the perfect item to drop again so you will have another chance. Being a millennial that doesn't like to work too hard for things that I want, I personally do not like this, and I hope Blizzard can come up with ways for players to add more tempering attempts to the items. As for masterworking, while Blizzard did say that they wanted the pit materials to be the main bottleneck to incentivize players to push for higher pit levels, they clearly missed the part where resetting masterwork costs 5 million gold each time. Since every gear has 5 affixes that can crit while masterworking, there is only a 1 in 5 chance to hit the affix that you want. So, if it takes 5 attempts on average to hit the right affix, that's going to be 4 resets, which will cost 20 million gold. And that's just for level 4 masterworking. If we are talking about a perfect level 8 or level 12 masterwork, it is going to cost a lot more. Sadly, farming for gold by doing whispers is not exactly a fun activity. So Blizzard has to either fix the gold cost for masterworking or makes gold more accessible from other content. To sum it all up, Between the Pit, Nightmare Dungeon, Endgame bosses, doing Whispers for gold, some Hell Tides for Season Journey and Gears, and dying to Uber Lilith a million times, I cannot believe I'm saying this, but Diablo 4 in-game at its current state is actually pretty good. Sure, there are some fine-tuning required like what I mentioned before, but those are relatively small fixes that can be improved quite quickly, and there's nothing major or fundamentally wrong unlike the previous seasons. That is all I wanted to say about the endgame of Diablo 4 in Season 4. I might be delusional about how good the endgame content really is, so feel free to let me know what do you think in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe will mean the world to me. Thank you so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.